The Dallas Cowboys are in the middle of one of the most fascinating roster transformations we've seen from this franchise in years, and almost every major move points toward one thing: a complete defensive identity shift. For a team that has spent the last several seasons chasing consistency on that side of the ball, the 2026 offseason has quickly become a laboratory for change, experimentation, and strategic risk. And nowhere is that transformation more visible than along the defensive line. In just a matter of days, the Cowboys made the surprising decision to move on from two interior defensive linemen, sending Osa Odighizuwa to the San Francisco 49ers in exchange for a third-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, while shipping Solomon Thomas to the Tennessee Titans in a smaller pick swap deal. On the surface, these moves might look like simple roster adjustments, but when you zoom out and examine the broader context of Dallas' defensive overhaul, the picture becomes much more complex. Odighizuwa's departure, in particular, has generated real debate among Cowboys fans and analysts. This was not a fringe contributor. Odighizuwa had quietly become one of the more reliable interior disruptors in the NFL. Over the past few seasons, he consistently generated pressure from the inside, finishing among the league's top interior defenders in quarterback pressures in consecutive years. Even as the Cowboys cycled through multiple defensive coordinators and different schemes, Odighizuwa's ability to collapse the pocket remained remarkably steady. What makes the decision even more puzzling to some observers is that the Cowboys had just signed him to a 4-year, $80 million contract extension in March of 2025. Typically, teams don't commit that kind of financial investment only to pivot away from the player a year later. That's why many around the league believe this trade says less about Odighizuwa's talent and more about the philosophical shift underway within Dallas' defensive structure. That shift begins with new defensive coordinator Christian Parker. Parker arrived with a reputation for adaptability, but the early roster moves suggest he has a very specific blueprint in mind for how the Cowboys' defense should look. One of the clearest patterns emerging from Dallas transactions is the emphasis on size along the defensive front. Just look at the body types currently populating the Cowboys' interior line. Quinnen Williams, one of the most dominant defensive tackles in football, weighs just over 300 pounds. Kenny Clark, another established Pro Bowl presence in the middle, checks in around 314 pounds. Jay Toya brings even more mass at roughly 340 pounds. And the recent addition of Otito Ogbonnia, who arrives from the Chargers at approximately 320 pounds, further reinforces the trend. Compare those numbers to the players Dallas moved on from. Odighizuwa was listed around 280 pounds. Solomon Thomas hovered in the mid-280 range. Perrion Winfrey, who was released earlier in the offseason, sat just under 290 pounds. The message from Parker's defensive blueprint is becoming crystal clear. The Cowboys want heavier bodies anchoring the middle of their defense. This approach likely signals a structural shift toward more 3-4 principles, or at the very least hybrid fronts that rely on powerful interior linemen capable of controlling multiple gaps. In those systems, defensive tackles are less about quick penetration and more about occupying blockers, holding the point of attack, and freeing linebackers to flow to the ball. For Parker, that might be the foundation of a defense built to withstand the physical offenses dominating today's NFL. When you face teams that want to establish the run while creating play-action opportunities, having sheer mass in the trenches becomes a strategic advantage. But changing the shape of the defensive line was only the beginning. Another headline move came when the Cowboys traded for veteran edge rusher Rashawn Gary, a player who arrives with strong connections to Dallas coaching staff. Gary previously worked with both defensive backs coach Derek Ansley and Parker himself during their time together in Green Bay. That familiarity likely played a significant role in Dallas' willingness to bring him in as a key part of the pass-rushing rotation. Gary's arrival doesn't necessarily solve every pass rush concern the Cowboys have, but it provides something the defense desperately needed: stability. Throughout his career, Gary has been a productive edge defender capable of generating consistent pressure even if he hasn't reached the elite tier occupied by players like Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson. Pairing Gary with younger pass rushers gives Dallas a rotational group that should at least raise the floor of the unit. The Cowboys also retained Sam Williams on a 1-year prove-it deal, another intriguing storyline that could play out in unpredictable ways this season. Williams entered the league as a second-round pick with tremendous athletic traits and early flashes of pass-rushing ability. In his first 2 seasons, he recorded 4 and 4.5 sacks respectively while working in a rotational role. The expectation was that he might take a significant leap forward when given a larger opportunity. Instead, his development hit several roadblocks. A knee injury wiped out an entire season during training camp preparations, and when he returned the following year, the defensive scheme under the previous coordinator didn't play to his strengths. His statistical production dropped dramatically, finishing the season with only 1 sack despite seeing increased playing time. Dallas' decision to bring him back on a modest 1-year deal is both a vote of cautious optimism and a clear challenge. This season will determine whether Williams can finally fulfill the potential that made him a high draft pick in the first place. While the defensive line and pass rush have dominated the headlines, the Cowboys have quietly addressed other areas of the roster as well. One of the most significant additions in the secondary was safety Jalen Thompson, an underrated defensive back whose versatility could prove invaluable in Parker's system. Thompson's football intelligence and ability to communicate adjustments from the back end of the defense make him a natural fit for a scheme that relies heavily on disguise and alignment shifts. When defensive coordinators want to create confusion for opposing quarterbacks, having a safety who can act as a secondary field general becomes essential. The Cowboys also added P.J. Locke to reinforce depth at the safety position, further strengthening a unit that struggled with consistency last season. Meanwhile, cornerback Kobe Durant joins the roster after spending the first 4 years of his career with the Los Angeles Rams. Durant brings experience and competitive toughness, traits Dallas will need as they attempt to solidify a cornerback group that still has lingering question marks. And the front office didn't stop there. Dallas also made a move to strengthen its offensive line depth by signing Matt Hennessy, a versatile interior lineman who could potentially replace Brock Hoffman. While this may not be a headline-grabbing transaction, teams that survive deep playoff runs almost always have reliable offensive line depth ready to step in when injuries strike. But if there's one position group that still looms as a major concern, it's linebacker. The Cowboys have yet to make a significant addition at the position despite watching several high-profile free agents sign elsewhere during the opening days of the market. That's why speculation has emerged around a potential trade for Steelers linebacker Patrick Queen. Queen's career has been something of a roller coaster. Coming out of LSU, he was widely viewed as one of the most athletically gifted linebackers in his draft class. His speed, coverage ability, and natural instincts made him a perfect modern NFL linebacker capable of staying on the field in every situation. However, his professional development has been uneven. After earning second-team All-Pro honors during a strong season with the Ravens, Queen's performance dipped following his move to Pittsburgh. Some critics believe he never fully refined the technical aspects of his game, particularly when it comes to shedding blocks and finishing tackles. But for the Cowboys, the potential upside might outweigh the risk, especially if the acquisition cost remains relatively low. In Parker's defense, a fast, rangy linebacker who can cover ground sideline to sideline could become a crucial piece of the puzzle. Of course, the Cowboys also understand that their long-term defensive rebuild may ultimately hinge on the upcoming NFL draft. Dallas currently holds 2 first-round picks, selections 12 and 20, and there is widespread expectation that both choices will be used on defensive players. One intriguing mock draft scenario has the Cowboys selecting LSU cornerback Mansour Delane with the 12th pick and Miami edge rusher Akeem Masitter at number 20. Delane's mastery of man coverage would give Parker the flexibility to deploy aggressive coverage packages, while Masitter's polished pass-rushing toolkit could immediately contribute to the defensive front. If Dallas manages to land 2 impact defenders on day 1 of the draft, the entire complexion of this defense could change overnight. And that's really the underlying theme of everything happening in Dallas right now. The Cowboys aren't making minor tweaks. They are re-engineering the foundation of their defense. Every trade, every signing, and every draft strategy discussion points toward the same objective: building a unit that aligns perfectly with Christian Parker's vision. Whether that vision ultimately leads to success remains one of the biggest questions heading into the upcoming season. But if you're a Cowboys fan trying to understand the bigger picture, here's the reality. This team is entering a new defensive era, one built on size in the trenches, versatility in the secondary, and a pass rush rotation designed to create consistent pressure without relying on a single superstar. And before we continue breaking down what all of this means for the Cowboys' future, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our deep dive analysis on every major NFL roster move this offseason. Because what's happening in Dallas right now might be one of the most important franchise turning points we've seen in years. Even special teams have their own storyline unfolding. Kicker Brandon Aubrey, one of the most remarkable success stories in recent NFL memory, is currently navigating the restricted free agency process after the Cowboys placed a second-round tender on him. Since entering the league in 2023, Aubrey has quickly established himself as one of the best kickers in football. He's already earned Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors while setting the NFL record for the most made field goals from 60 yards or longer. That type of production has inevitably raised questions about his long-term contract value, especially as the kicker market continues to climb following recent record-setting deals elsewhere in the league. For Aubrey, the situation is largely out of his hands. The tender allows Dallas to match any competing offer or receive a second-round draft pick in return. It's a strategic move by the front office, giving them leverage while they continue negotiating a potential long-term extension. And when you step back and consider the full scope of this offseason, one thing becomes very clear. The Cowboys are reshaping almost every layer of their roster. From the defensive trenches to the secondary, from special teams to depth pieces along the offensive line, Dallas is making calculated decisions designed to position the team for sustained competitiveness. But the success of these moves won't be measured in March headlines. It will be determined on Sundays in the fall, when the new defensive system takes the field against real opponents. If Parker's blueprint works, the Cowboys could transform one of the league's most inconsistent defenses into a physically imposing, strategically versatile unit capable of carrying the team deep into the postseason. If it doesn't, the criticism surrounding trades like the Odigizwa deal will only grow louder. Either way, the Cowboys have made their intentions clear. They're betting big on a new defensive identity, and that gamble is about to define the next chapter of football in Dallas. If you enjoyed this deep breakdown of the Cowboys' offseason transformation, make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Do you believe these moves will fix the Dallas defense, or do you think the front office made a major mistake trading away key players like Osa Odigizwa? Because one thing is certain. The entire NFL will be watching to see whether this bold defensive rebuild turns the Cowboys into contenders or becomes another chapter in the franchise's long search for postseason dominance.